Welcome, Diogo, so much for joining us at Own Future Fair. Thank you. My name is Natalie, and I'm the founder of Own Academy, and we're so excited to have you to share your story and your journey with students. So before we start, if you can just tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be amazing.
No problem. Hi, Natalie, and thank you. My pleasure, not yours. So my story, I'm from Portugal. I work for Spotify, which is a audio streaming platform. So we used to call ourselves music, but now it's audio because of podcasts and the growth of podcast content. I'm from Portugal. I'm based in Singapore. I lived a little bit everywhere. So grew up in Portugal, moved to France, studied in Italy for a year, 2 years, and moved to Hong Kong, and now in Singapore. So that's my kind of journey, personal journey in here.
Amazing. And how long have you been with Spotify? What do you do for Spotify?
So I've been with Spotify for almost 3 years. My role is a bit complicated, but title-wise is head of automation across the region, so
What does
Southeast
that
Asia
mean?
and Taiwan. It doesn't mean much, but it means a lot internally, especially. So my role is essentially looking after the advertising sales side of the business and helping that whole team move into a new world where technology enables them to sell advertising space and data on Spotify versus manual processes and still a very heavy lifting sales force. So my role is to help them in that transition. So yeah, that's what I've been doing for the
And what
past
was
almost
Spotify
3 years.
like when you joined and versus what is the direction of the company now?
It did change a little bit. I think this industries and this side of the world changes fast anyway. But globally, Spotify really, when I joined, was purely focused on music. Music was really the direction of the company. From an advertising sales point of view, again, it was still very manual. I'd say about 90 to 95% of the advertising business was still transacted on contracts. So not really using technology. And if
Can
you
you explain
fast
what that
forward,
means in the manual format? What does manual contractual
yeah,
mean?
it's a good question. I think a great analogy that I use, and I think I've discussed that with you before, is thinking of transportation. But a lot of industries obviously have gone through this transformation. If you think of how private transportation, like taxis, worked previously before the Ubers, the Grabs, the Gojeks of the world, is a little bit of what's happening with advertising. So previously, if I wanted to go from my place into my office and I wanted to take a taxi, either I would flag someone in the street or I would have to call the taxi company, book a taxi, off I go. I pay the taxi driver. And essentially, that's how advertising, for the most part, is being transacted now. So I have to phone someone that I know I want advertising space from. I book my advertising space, I have a contract coming out, and I pay that person. So the transformation that is happening with advertising is similar to what Uber, for example, introduced. More relevant for Hong Kong, what Uber introduced to that industry, where you have an application that connects you, the person A to person B. You transact and you pay via that application. Pricing is dynamic and really, transacts and allows more people to access private transportation and more people to, as a consumer, and obviously as someone that has a car. Same thing here in the advertising space. So this allows an advertiser to connect with more platforms and for platforms to connect with more advertisers, where payment is transacted via tech platform. And that is essentially what automation, the right term in advertising is called programmatic. And we made a conscious effort internally at Spotify, and actually I drove that a little bit to change that name into automation because I think it makes more sense in it. There's also another kind of going back to your original question of what changed. I think the other two things that were big was podcasts. So Spotify really identified themselves as a music streaming platform, and now with the rise of podcasts and the amount of acquisitions they've done in the last 2 years, it really is a music platform, which means, an audio platform. So audio content overall. And with that, I think one of the greatest opportunities they saw from an advertising standpoint is create their own self-serve advertising platform.
So I love how you do like automation work, but then can you show us kind of a typical project or something that you go through on a daily basis to give us more of a deeper insight of what you do?
So this self-serve tool, if you can see the slides that I'm showing you, as we launched this self-serve tool in Philippines and Singapore, which are two key markets for us, this is essentially how we structure that launch. So first of all, we need to identify why is there an opportunity and what issue are we trying to tackle? So why do we want this to go forward? We obviously have a short summary of what we want to do. And in this case, we want to do a summit, like an event with SMEs, so small and medium businesses or enterprises, and we want to show them the benefits of using our platform as an advertising tool, the activities that are going to be attached to that, so that's important as well to us. And then we kind of lay out, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the RACI model. So the RACI model kind of helps you understand roles, accountability. So it helps understand who needs to do what and how much heavy lifting different functions will have. I think there's kind of four buckets of stuff that I do. There's a lot of internal things. I spend a lot of time with the sales team, so there's a lot of ongoing calls, ongoing kind of catch-ups, be it over coffee or over lunch, to ensure that internally we're all aligned. There's a lot of external stuff, and that's more like client or advertising agency facing, where we either need to present or kind of catch up and make sure that we're on top of what's happening in their world. And I think what you also questioned me last time is most of my job as well is to keep forecasts and reporting on point. We use different tools for that. So there's Salesforce and Tableau, are two big software companies that help us digest data and feed us with the right data points. But that's essentially those two things are, extremely important to me, internal and external differentiation. Even if you look at my calendar, which we also spoke about, you can kind of see that split. So there's a lot of entertainment stuff when it involves external parties. So example here, like if you look at here, majority of my catch-ups, like Diogo and Adri, all of these are sales leads in the company that I have to kind of be talking to on a bi-weekly basis. But for example, this evening I'm going to Fragment Room, which is actually quite a funny concept if you haven't heard of it, is you essentially go into a room and you break stuff with a baseball bat. It's pretty interesting. But these are opportunities, for example, for us to take a music label. So we work very closely with the label. So we go with Universal Music to do this, and then we kind of grab a drink. So it's going from internal formal reporting, team health and all that, and business health, to kind of fun activities and catching up with partners.
And what else do you have on your tabs that you can share in terms of kind of your daily routine or?
Yeah, I think one thing that I would love to share, and I hope it will be useful for everyone. So I have a big policy of
the work that you do.
Inbox zero. So inbox zero meaning I don't have any new emails on my inbox. If I receive an email, I either delete it or I star it if I need to reply to it, or if I have the answer, I'll just reply to it immediately. And that helps me have less anxiety and have a better organized work. I chat a lot on Hangouts. So as you can see here, all these tabs open are essentially conversations I've been having with the teams. One important thing as well, and I think it's the luxury of being in markets like Singapore or Hong Kong, you end up working with a lot of different countries. So we have teams in Indonesia, in Philippines, in Taiwan, in Malaysia. So I really, really have to keep the communication open. So my number one role, an important role in the company, is to keep all these people motivated. So it's to keep them motivated, to keep them aware of what we're doing, to make them understand why we're in this journey, and keep them on point. So a lot of my role is actually that ongoing conversation, which is a day-to-day thing.
How do you keep your team motivated? Because I think like as a leader in schools, we always talk about you need to be a leader and like get your team motivated, but sometimes you may be stuck in a team with people that just don't want to do anything. So how do you manage that, and how do you motivate your team?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there's two things for that I found very useful in my career. One is understanding who's good at what, kind of understanding which skill sets you have in a team. It's impossible that 20 people have the same skills and the same interests and the same motivations. So I think understanding each one and each individual and what triggers them and what are they really interested in doing and motivated, and then allocating work and communicating with them based on those interests. I think that's super important and it works very well. I think if you are an expert, if you know what you're talking about, if you show up, if you're professional, if you're on time, like small things just make people want to work better because they're inspired by your work ethic or your knowledge or anything that you can position yourself in a way that they respect you.
And are there other tools that you work with that can give students a behind the scenes of understanding how digital marketing applies? Because I think marketing, a lot of people would think of it, oh, we just create beautiful ads. But do you do the creative part of it, or is it just the data piece of it?
It's an excellent question. I think it's also interesting to know how the marketing industry has evolved a lot. One of the struggles I find with speaking to students that, for example, are in marketing, the other day I did, SMU is a big university here in Singapore, and I did like a mentorship call where we're kind of virtually engaging with the students, and the students could kind of ask questions, and it was really, really interesting. And they were all marketing students. And I think we're selling it wrongly, in the totally wrong spectrum of what marketing should be. Everyone thinks, and students are kind of in this mentality that I'm going to become a marketer, change the tagline of a company, do this huge TV ad, and I'm going to be, winning awards, and I'm going to be this kind of messiah of for this brand that I'm going to represent. But marketing is no longer that. The idea that marketing is building a big TVC or doing this big outdoor with a tagline that is going to change the world is very different. People now access information at all times. You won't be able to even, cut the cord by creating that. So I think marketing has become a lot more of a data exercise, and being nimble, agile, understanding technology, and having the best way to store and read your data. I think that's what is going to be absolutely essential in any marketer moving forward.
Yeah. And do you learn this like, how can you learn this otherwise if you want to become a marketer? What would be?
I just think, to be honest, I just think universities and whoever curates that course need to be honest about what marketing is. It's not as sexy, correct? Like, but if you come in with the idea that you're going to sit down in a room and have a glass of whiskey and think about, the next big thing for Coca-Cola, it's not. So you might as well set the expectations right from the start and filter down the people that are interested in data, that are interested in, do you know what I mean? In data analytics and topics like that, which are going to be essentially what you do as a marketer. I mean, there's no one, probably there's 5 marketers in the world that still operate like that. And they are incredibly well respected, and they've been working in marketing for 20, 30, 40 years. There's no one walking into a marketing job today that in the next 10 years is even going to be in that position. So this is essentially one of the most important kind of looks and softwares for us, which is Salesforce. Salesforce, obviously within Salesforce, we can create multiple different reports to read the data that we ingest. So this is essentially the data from programmatic, which is that whole world of automation, so tech-driven kind of purchase. This also shows me which formats are actually being sold. So in this case, audio is 60% of what we're selling. Then we have video and we have display. So this also helps me identify, depending on the trends, we're underselling video, for example? How can we do a better job of doing that? Is it the narrative that is wrong? Which market is actually dropping? Because this is across 8 markets. So all those things are interesting. This is the industries that are buying from us. So you have CPG, you have technology, you have retail. So this also really helps us to understand, where do we need support? Do we need a big narrative and approach to CPG, because it's such an important part of our business? So then here I can actually see who are the top advertisers within this quarter and the agencies that are actually driving that business. So I can look at here and see Samsung, Foodpanda, Unilever, Gojek. So it gives me obviously a good idea of who's spending and who's not. This helps me understand who are our largest clients in this quarter. It also obviously helps me compare with previous quarters, understand what's our retention rate and exactly how are we growing this account. Obviously, this helps me as well allocate my own time, because I can't support 8 teams at the same time. So if I look at this, clearly 3 markets are ahead of the curve in terms of revenue. So those are the markets I'm going to spend time with. So that's Philippines, Indonesia, and Singapore. I'm going to give them my time because I know there's potential there, and the revenue obviously is what determines my focus as well.
Fascinating. So with all this kind of like transition in the way that the marketing space is, then what would you say are the skills that if a fresh grad were to come into marketing, what would they need to know to do your job well?
Yeah, it's again, we're going back to the familiar terms that I've already used. So I definitely think there's still a big element of people skills, definitely. So not to be totally boring and keep talking about data and processes, I think that balance between hard and soft skills in marketing has never been more important. So on the hard skills, definitely data. I think data is and will be the most important topic of our industry for the next 20 years. It's just everywhere, and it's very rightly so a skill set that I think everyone will need to get into marketing and do it effectively. So data, not only understanding data, but reading data, a data analytics component, but also like almost a BI, like business insights, like understand how to read data. And the soft skills, I think they're still super important. I think marketing in a way is still very much psychology, like you always have to deal with teams, no? So that's the first one. But the psychology element is super important to anticipate what people are going to think, or what people are going to feel, or what they're going to need. You need to be very much in touch with what's happening in the world. You need to read very well emotions and political affairs as well, like understanding what the shift is in culture and how can you enter that space. Like it's very interesting. Like you see car crashes of campaigns because someone is not sensitive to what's happening in the world and just pushes something out that makes absolutely no sense, and it's almost borderline offensive. And you see other companies understanding, like, look at what Nike did during lockdown. They produced this incredible video, which is essentially all these top athletes, exercising at home and kind of giving this hope to people, saying, nothing can stop us. No, like, you can be at home, you can exercise, you can feel powerful, you can stay in shape. It's such a powerful message and very reactive to what's happening. That marketing team has to be in touch with what's happening in the world, what people are feeling, and how can your brand enter that space. I think those two, to kind of really be able to have that balance of understanding data, reports, and knowing your role as a marketer is going to be a lot of that. Understanding your consumer, where is your consumer, how to read technology platforms and softwares that can help you with that. Plus, and this is the tough part, being in touch with what's happening in the world and understanding and being quick to react, understanding what the role of your brand is in the world. All brands have that, some brands more than others. So it's much easier for a Nike than it is for Standard Chartered, but there is a role always.
Wow. Diogo, amazing. Thank you so much for sharing such great insights, and definitely learned so much from you. So thank you again. And I think right now we'll move on to the live Q&A.